Hi, this is Brian. I'm going to review The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morse. This is book one of three. First off, I would like to say that Theodore Roosevelt is my second favorite U.S. president, right under Abraham Lincoln. And in terms of manliness, independence, and masculinity, this guy is the tops. Edmund Morse, the author, is from Africa, and he is more of an intellectual. He writes very clearly and very elegantly, and he published this book around 1980, as well as it became a Pulitzer Prize winner. Theodore was very sick when he was younger. He was always teased about it, got left out of certain sports and events. He also had bad vision, where he is known to always have his spectacles. And this caused a great insecurity in him, and his dad told him, in quotes, "Theodore, you have the mind, but you have not the body," he said, "and without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should. You must make your body." And for whatever he was lacking, he made up in vigor. He did so many wild things in his life, as whenever something bad happened in his life, he would just throw himself into physical adversity, whatever it may be. He wanted a challenge. In terms of describing Roosevelt's personality, he had humor, magnetism, an amusing likability. He was manly, brave, and he possessed wordless persuasion. And in quotes, there was a harmony of southern refinement and northern vigor, feminine humor and masculine seriousness. He had a good combination of northern values, southern values, and the wild, wild west. One great thing about him too, as well, is he traveled the world many times. He'd been to Africa, the Amazon, Brazil, and also when he was younger, he went out on a trip with his dad out to parts of Europe and into Egypt. I think this really greatly influenced him in terms of connectedness and just to see what it was like outside of America. Also, in terms of to hard himself up, he didn't want to end up like the typical New York he was. I think he went to Harvard. His family was from New York, so he was already coming from an established family, and he pretty much rebelled against this and bought a house in the Badlands, a national park I have not been to, and was hunting. He killed maybe 1,000 animals. He got in touch with the spirit of the West, I would call it. Rugged individualism and independence. And in terms of being this individual, he also studied animals. He wanted to learn about everything. And this is something, you have to take away from this guy, is that he wanted to learn everything. He was very well read. Despite everything he learned, he'd always read books. He always wanted to learn what others before him had done. He was a skilled self-promoter. He took advantage of the press. Like nowadays, you see the press really being destroyed. Everything's becoming social media, and really right now, as the media lies about so many things, that he had a persona to convey. He was known as a cowboy, and he would always appear in full cowboy regalia. And in quotes, "Keep yourself before the public always." He rose to prominence very early on. He was elected part of the New York Council. He was also very warlike and had the fighting spirit. He created this band of people called the Rough Riders, and they charged up into Cuba. And in this display of courage, they wound up winning this war, the Spanish-American War in Cuba. He wanted pretty much all of Europe to be out of the North American continent. And this came at the rise of America, where they had built the Panama Canal. The economy was doing real good, so it was a very interesting time during these early 1900s. And in terms of Wild Wild West, some of my favorite people that I used to look up to, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, and Buffalo Bill. I went to his museum out near Denver, Colorado. If you have a chance to go see that, it's overlooking a hill, and it shows an interesting mix of who Buffalo Bill was. Buffalo Bill was different. He got along with the actual Native Americans. And here's another quote from the book. "Buffalo Bill said to me in the utmost confidence, 'Theodore Roosevelt is the only New York dude that has got the making of a man in him.'" Here's another quote. "New dangers and new opportunities. As the frontier moved west, he was Americanized at a much quicker rate than the sedentary Europe-influenced Easterner." And this really puts in a contrast what type of people, are alive. Is you have the big city people, and then you have the wild people, or people outside the city living in the country. And what I think now is more people need to go outside. I think males have gotten they're too soft. They're hipsters, they're zombies. They just stare at their screen all day. And in a time when people are being, men are not really men anymore, I think a great place to go out is the West. I go out there all the time. I've been to maybe half the national parks. I go hiking, rock climbing, mountain biking, and it's something that's missing from people's lives. Some people don't even want to. Some people don't even want to try. They rather just go to the bar and act like they know everything. And here's a quote that relates to that and this is what Roosevelt said: "No man can associate with sheep and retain his self-respect." And in terms of being a man, you have to be an individual. You can't just be following the crowd, being a beta orbiter, being a hipster. You are not just a mimicry. If you are, it's time to get wild. What I didn't like about Roosevelt is, this is kind of hard during this time as America was coming into power and Europe was kind of backtracking and losing it. And I think this is a great thing. I'm glad that America exists. The whole concept of war and having war. No one really wants to have war, but if you're going to have that attitude of conquering people and then taking their stuff, that is something I don't really approve of. Roosevelt still had this mentality. He wanted to be a kick-ass president, a cowboy, a shoot mentality, pushing out the natives. He wanted to win. But you got to handle anyone, a nation or a person who can handle their own and be independent by themselves. More people need solitude to figure things out, to look at themselves. And one of those interesting things about Roosevelt, he always had a comeback. He always wanted a challenge. If something bad happened in his life, what happened too is his mother, and his wife died in the same day on Valentine's Day. And this threw him into some mental tailspin where he ignored it, but he just threw himself into the wild. Every single time something bad to him, he would try to turn it around, a sink and a rise. And I think this book is perfectly suited, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. We want to see that phoenix rise. Other books I think you should check out are the second and third books, Colonel Roosevelt. Also, The River of Doubt by Candace Millard, which I will be reviewing next, and Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And the reason why I chose that book is because there's an awesome quote. Really exudes who Roosevelt is in terms of being in the arena. It's really the game. There's spectators, and then there's people that have skin in the game. And I think you want to be that person that is in the game. Also, I do more research on the Roosevelt's Rough Riders. They were also known as the Rough Riders, but they were, everything's connected. And I remember the rap music, they had this rapper called DMX, and his crew was called the Rough Riders. And this can spawn the Rough Ravers. And Jamalski and Mars and Mystery will know about the Rough Ravers. Ride or die. You shouldn't run away. You either ride or die. Edmund Morris also wrote a Ronald Reagan biography, so I have not read that. But he wrote this book in a very fancy and intellectual way. It is hard for someone to, you read all these research papers about him, about Roosevelt, and it's hard to put someone in a box. But I think this is the one, he is one of the most complex people to ever live. And in terms of masculinity, this guy is something kids should strive for. To read, to be brave, to be independent. Where have all the cowboys gone? I have a newfound respect for this guy. I'm going to read more of his books. He's interesting. He's an enigma.